our guest. This seminar is devoted to social sciences, and our guest is Anna Baranowska-Rataj. She's associate professor at the Department of Sociology at Umeå University, and she's a member of the Center for Demographic and Aging Research. Her research interests concern processes at the intersection of labor market, family, and as well as health and well-being of family members. Currently, she leads the project. Leads the project entitled "The Effects of Unemployment on Health and Family Members," and this is our main topic for today. This project is funded by ERC's starting grant. It examines how transition to unemployment triggered diffusion of ill mental and physical health within families. So Anna, the floor or the Zoom is yours. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dominika, for introducing me. Let me see if I can share the screen so that everyone can see my presentation. Does it work?
Yes, it does.
I think I still need to press one more button.
Yeah.
Yeah, now I think.
Perfect, yeah.
Great, many thanks. So hello everyone. I would like to thank Polonium Foundation for giving me this opportunity to give a talk at this webinar. I'd like to present you some results from my ongoing project, which is financed by the European Research Council, as Dominika was kind to mention. And this project concerns the effects of unemployment on health of family members, and this is going to be the topic of my talk. So the motivation for this project is that unemployment has become a common experience on the modern labor markets, which have become quite volatile across last several decades. And we already know that the ongoing economic crisis triggered by the pandemic will also leave many people without jobs. So these questions about the consequences of job losses are probably even more relevant now than ever. And we know that unemployment has implications for the financial situation of individuals, but also for their health and well-being. Because losing a job leads to deprivation of important human needs, such as time structure, social contacts, participation in regular activities, and therefore unemployment is related to poor mental and physical health. And actually there are many studies documenting this association. However, previous studies have been mostly concerned with how losing a job affects health of the person who experiences this loss. And the consequences carried by the family members of the unemployed remain under-investigated. And in my project, I take the stand that no man is an island, to quote a British poet, John Donne. And so one key aspect of my project is that it examines how the health effects of unemployment spread among family members. And specifically, my recent questions consider the health of partners, married or otherwise, children, and parents of the unemployed. And of course, at this point, one could ask why we're looking at the links between spouses or between children and parents, and why don't we examine how unemployment experienced by one person affects this person's siblings or cousins, for example. And I just wanted to explain that it will be actually very interesting to examine also other types of family relations. But for this project, I have chosen to focus on these links between closest family members who are most likely to be both emotionally close and also economically interdependent. And in many contexts, maybe this does not relate to siblings or cousins. And one central goal of this project is to provide a better understanding of how and why unemployment of one family member may actually have impact on health and well-being of another family member, what are the mechanisms behind these influences. And to this end, we draw on theoretical concepts from different disciplines, including psychology or epidemiology. So for example, later on during this presentation, I would like to refer to the concepts of spillover and crossover effects, and these concepts have been actually developed by psychologists, and we apply them in this project. And we're also interested in how these effects of unemployment on health of family members vary depending on who loses this job, whether this is a man or a woman, for example, depending on what kind of resources this person can have access to. So we compare the effects across families. And an important component of my project is related to international comparisons, so to differences across societies. We know that societies differ in terms of policies and social norms that shape the way that unemployment is experienced. And so in this project, we take this comparative perspective and we provide systematic evidence on differences in the magnitude of health effects of unemployment across different countries. And by comparing countries, we hope to get better possibilities for finding out how policies can cushion the impact of unemployment on family members' health. So in other words, we want to find out what helps families to deal with these negative effects of unemployment. So these are my research questions for the whole project. And now I would like to explain how my further presentation will be structured. So actually, I would like to present you some preliminary results from the first component of my project. And I would like to discuss the results from studies that we have already carried out with my team members. And this first project component deals with the first research question that I mentioned on the previous slide. So it focuses on the effects of unemployment on health and well-being within couples. And so I'd like to first talk a little bit about our theoretical ideas that motivate our studies. Then I would like to briefly explain the methodological approaches that we take in this project, but without getting into too much detail, without discussing too many technical aspects. And then I would like to describe the key results from our studies, and then I will share some ideas I have for the next years. So let me move on. We mentioned that unemployment may have detrimental effects on individual health and well-being. And one obvious reason for that is that employment provides us with income, and reductions in economic resources usually require adjustments in living standards, adjustments in our lifestyle. These changes may lead to increases in unhealthy and decreases in healthy behaviors, and so on. But employment provides us not only with income, it also provides us with other things that are actually quite important for human health and well-being. And the benefits of employment for individual well-being could be understood from the perspective of Ware's vitamin model. So the vitamins in this model refer to distinct factors, which include the opportunity for personal control, social contacts, career outlooks, and actually different domains of life, such as work-related domain or family-related domain, can provide these benefits, of course. And in analogy to vitamins, underdosage can be harmful for health. So when people lose their jobs, they can become deprived from all these benefits that would otherwise be provided by employment, and this may result in deterioration of health. And I think that this model is quite intuitive. It's very easy to grasp the key ideas behind it. But now the question comes, so how do these effects transfer to a partner, to a spouse of the unemployed person? Why unemployment experienced by one spouse may affect another spouse? So if we think about this first financial argument, we need to, of course, keep in mind that in most couples, partners are economically interdependent. So spouses tend to share household budgets. They don't put lockers on the fridge. So when one spouse loses the main source of income, all these mechanisms that I have described earlier, related to changes in living standards, changes in lifestyle, and so on, they apply to both partners, not only to the unemployed person. So from this perspective, financial consequences can be considered as a common stressor. And we can provide some additional arguments in relation to the spillover crossover model developed by Bakker and Temeruti. And this model defines spillover effects as the within-person transmission of feelings and emotions across different life domains. And this transmission can occur despite the physical and temporal boundaries between persons' professional and family lives. And so when people become unemployed, these bad emotions and so on can transmit from home-related domain, from work-related domain to the home-related domain. They can get transmitted into private life. And then within private life, within private space, they can cross over from the unemployed person onto the spouse. And this happens especially that spouses tend to interact with each other very often, and because they share private space. And these crossover effects may operate through empathy, because spouses usually tend to share each other's emotional states. So that's one possible channel. But then this transmission, these crossover effects, they can also happen for another reason. So basically, the changes in the employment status of one part of the partners may lead to, well, emotional reactions and behaviors that may place a burden on another spouse. And this can result in deterioration of health outcomes. So sum up, based on these theoretical ideas, we can have some clear arguments why spouses of the unemployed may experience deterioration of health. First of all, this can result from common stressors, such as reduction in economic resources, but then we also know that it may also happen due to indirect transmission through reduced relationship quality. And these are our theoretical ideas. I would like to just say a couple of words about our research as a design or our methodological approach. I know that this audience is comprised of researchers and scientists from very different disciplines, so I don't really want to bore you with too much discussion about our statistical methods, especially that I know that not everybody is a fan of statistics. But let me just say that unlike in life sciences or medical sciences, in my project, it is not really possible, I believe, to carry out a randomized trial or to make an experiment. So I can't really choose a treatment group where participants would, well, lose their jobs and then compare their family members' health to a control group where people would be allowed by me to keep their jobs. And if I was able and willing to do that, the ethical review board would probably not give me a permission for such an experiment. And so in this project, we just use observational data that are derived from longitudinal registers and longitudinal panel surveys. And what's common for all the data sets that I use in my project is that the multiple family members are observed in these data for extended periods of time. And we use statistical methods that bring us closer to understanding of what may be the causal effects of unemployment on health of family members. So one crucial aspect of these methods is the longitudinal approach, which captures how transitions out of employment into unemployment affect changes in health outcomes of family members. And observing the temporal order of these events that are of interest to us, that is observing when someone lost a job and whether family members started to experience health problems before that job loss, after this job loss, this is already helpful for our project. And why is that important? Because in research on unemployment and health, causation can go both ways. So for example, in research on individual unemployment and personal health, it has been shown that unemployment affects health, just as this model that I have described earlier, the vitamin model, predicts. But apart from that, poor health also increases the risk of a job loss. It affects the probability of unemployment. So this means that when we use simple statistical measures and when we use cross-sectional data, it is easy to overestimate the effects. It is easy to get results that suggest that the relationship between unemployment and health is much stronger than it is in reality. And it is quite plausible that a similar problem arises with respect to spouses' health and individual labor market chances. So it may be that, for example, when one spouse has some chronic illness, this may create a need for additional caregiving duties, and it can limit productivity of another spouse. And then as a result, the other spouse loses a job, becomes unemployed. And so this is just another example where we can have this reverse causation. So longitudinal data are helpful here to understand what was the reason and what was the cause and what was the effect. And this is what I wanted to relate to with this icon presenting camera on this slide. So with cross-sectional data, we just see at one time point what's the labor market status of different family members, for example, spouses, and what's their health, but with a little bit like on a photo. But with longitudinal data, we can observe what happened, in what order, what was the cause, what was the effect, a little bit like in a movie. Okay, but enough about methods. I would like to move on. I would like to show you the results from some of the studies that we carried out with my team in this project. These studies address the following questions. First of all, we wanted to get some more insights into what mechanisms lead to crossover effects within couples. Then we wanted also to see how these crossover effects differ depending on who loses a job, a man or a woman, what kind of resources are available to these persons. And then we wanted also to examine how the effects of unemployment of a spouse compare to other labor market experiences of a spouse. And then finally, we also wanted to see in international comparisons how financial support from the state may help couples to deal with the otherwise negative effects of unemployment. So let me move on to the first study. So in this first step, we wanted to see what kind of factors may generate these crossover effects. And this study investigates specifically this question, and it also looks at gender effects and crossover effects. So in this study, we carried out longitudinal analysis using panel data for Germany. And in the first step of our analysis already, we found that the effects, these crossover effects that I have been talking about, they actually differ depending on who loses a job. So we found gendered patterns of these crossover effects. So we see that for women's well-being, unemployment of a partner matters basically almost as much as own unemployment. But we actually found no crossover effects among men. And then in the second step, we wanted to see what explains these crossover effects that are observed, well, mostly among women. And what we found is that financial reasons play an important role, and they explain about 1/3 of the total crossover effects among women. But we also see that changes in relationship quality matter. So they explain about 16% of the overall crossover effects. And then in the next step, we have done more detailed analysis to see how exactly these mediating effects of relationship quality function for men and women. We also implemented very detailed measures of different aspects of relationship functioning. So what we found was that basically for women, we found that women whose partners became unemployed, they reported more negative patterns of communication and interactions, more destructive conflict styles, increasing relationship instability. This was also something that they perceived and reported, but men didn't really report any of these things. when their female partners lost jobs. So it seems like men's relationship quality and stability tended to be unaffected by their female partners' unemployment. And then an interesting aspect of this whole thing is that when the quality of relationship changes after transition to unemployment, this has negative impact on well-being of spouses, regardless of gender. So actually, relationship quality is important for both men and women, but because it changes more strongly as a result of men's unemployment, this mechanism leads to greater reductions in well-being among the female partners of the unemployed men. But it doesn't have the same effect when women lose their jobs. So it is likely that when men experience unemployment, this may lead to behaviors and reactions that change relationship functioning and affect well-being of female partners. And this finding is actually consistent with previous research showing that there are gendered reactions to critical life course events. This research shows that men tend to have stronger reactions to a change in their socioeconomic status compared to women, and that these reactions tend to be externalized, which may have impact on relations with spouses. In the second study that I wanted to present for you, we wanted to compare whether the effects of unemployment differ across couples with differential access to economic resources. And we expected that in couples that are better educated and that have better resources, the effects of unemployment should be weaker because these resources can be mobilized to handle the otherwise negative financial consequences. We also expected, following the same line of reasoning, that receiving unemployment benefits should be something that at least partly offsets the otherwise negative effects of unemployment on health. But then again, we found that the degree to which unemployment benefits can be helpful may depend on the pre-existing resources. So one could sort of argue that lower educated couples need financial support more. So for them, the benefits from receiving unemployment benefits should be stronger. On the other hand, we need to keep in mind always the context. In this case, we were using the data for Germany, and it so happens that in Germany, the unemployment benefits depend on prior earnings, meaning that unemployment benefits will be higher on average for better educated couples. So following this line of reasoning, we could expect that the effects of unemployment benefits could be stronger, more positive for better educated couples. So it's an open question whom these receipts of unemployment benefits help to higher degree. And I would like to show you our results. This is work in progress. In the first step, we wanted to find out how these effects of partners' unemployment differ across couples with different level of education. And here on this figure, on the vertical axis, you can see how strongly partners' unemployment reduces well-being. And on the horizontal axis, you can see bars representing the effects for couples with different level of education. As we expected, the negative effects of partners' unemployment on well-being are stronger among couples with lower levels of education. And then we wanted to see to what degree unemployment benefits, financial support can be helpful for different couples. And we can see that actually unemployment benefits help, although the effects are not super strong. But then also the interesting aspect of these effects of financial support is that these protective effects are stronger for couples who are better educated, meaning that the support helps those people who are already in better situation before a job loss to a higher degree. So I guess these results show what are the opportunities, but also what are the limitations of public interventions when it comes to dealing with the effects of job losses. And in the next study that I wanted to also present to you, we wanted to examine the effects of unemployment on spouses' well-being again. And similarly as in the previous paper, we wanted to compare the effects for men and women, but here, instead of contrasting two situations, employment versus unemployment, we wanted to consider some kind of in-between scenario. So we are looking at also at the impact of temporary employment. So in other words, we wanted to take into account that some jobs are permanent and offer a lot of security, but other jobs can be regarded as less secure because employees know from the very beginning that their employment contract ends at a specific date and that they will have to search for a different job afterwards. And actually, these temporary jobs have raised a lot of controversies, both in academic circles, especially in sociology. It has been emphasized that the distinction between different types of employment contracts is one of the key dimensions of social inequalities on the modern labor market. But there have been also controversies in policymaking circles. So in our home country, in Poland, for example, maybe you recall that there has been this debate that temporary jobs could be labeled as trash contracts. They have been argued to be the main reason for young people's misery in our country, and so on and so forth. So I felt that it makes sense not to treat all kinds of jobs as one homogeneous category, but instead in this paper we distinguish between permanent employment, temporary employment, and unemployment. And we look at how these different labor market experiences affect the well-being of a partner or a spouse. And in this paper we also compare two different societal contexts, West and East Germany. And I'm actually not sure how much people in this audience know about these two regions of Germany. Let me just say that West Germany has been always considered as very conservative, whereas East Germany has been seen in the literature as more egalitarian. We know that the social acceptance and institutional conditions for women's employment and combining family with paid work have been much better in East Germany. And so we wanted to see whether these gender differences in crossover effects that we observed earlier are stronger in a conservative context of Western Germany, where men are considered to be main breadwinners, and when male job loss can have stronger effects as compared to East Germany. So let me show you the results that we got. So on this graph, on the horizontal axis, we have pointed the effects of partners' transitions between different labor market statuses, and we have shown how they affect well-being. And black triangles represent the effects of transitions experienced by men, and grayish dots represent the effects of transitions experienced by women. So the results that I would like to draw your attention to in the first place show that even if we compare unemployment to these jobs that are considered as less secure and more precarious, so if we compare unemployment to temporary jobs, we still see that spouses' employment is better for individual well-being than a situation when a spouse is unemployed. And what this graph shows is that a transition from unemployment to a temporary job improves well-being of a spouse. But again, consistently with what we saw in previous studies, it actually matters who experiences this transition, a man or a woman. So if a man stops unemployment and gets a temporary job, this improves well-being of a wife or a partner. But for men, it doesn't really matter whether his wife or a female partner is unemployed, has a temporary job or a permanent job. It just doesn't really seem to play any role for individual well-being. But then another interesting aspect of our results is that this gender gap in the crossover effects is much wider in conservative Western Germany as compared to Eastern Germany. So basically, this goes in line with our expectations that these gender differences are particularly strong in a conservative societal context. So this is the main takeaway message from this paper. I believe that societal context matters. And now I would like to present you the last study that I selected for this presentation. Actually, this paper has been already accepted for a publication. I was really hoping that I could add a link to a publication. Unfortunately, even though the paper was accepted in April, it is still being printed. The pandemic has distorted the publishing process, but instead of a link, I can just summarize for you the key results. So basically in this paper, we were again interested in taking a comparative perspective, but instead of contrasting just two regions or two countries, we actually draw on the data for 28 European countries, and we carried out analysis to see systematic differences in crossover effects. And we wanted to analyze how they relate to the financial support received from the welfare state. And what we find in the study that the financial support indeed decreases the magnitude of the crossover effects. However, the role of this financial support is actually not super strong. And we could see that there are other factors that play a very important role as well. So again, we see that in countries with higher gender equality, women are affected by their partner's unemployment less than in conservative countries. So again, it's a message, a similar message to the one that we saw in the previous paper they presented. But here we have results that are based on a broader range of countries with a broad continuum between different, between generosity and limited support from the welfare state. And we have a whole continuum between super conservative countries and quite egalitarian countries. So I was happy that different approaches bring very similar results. But I guess the main message from this paper is similar to what we have seen before, that conservative context is actually not that good for families at all. Okay, so now let me summarize what we have learned from these preliminary studies that we have carried out. We found that changes in financial situation are an important mechanism that contributes to the crossover effects. We have also seen that these changes in financial situation do not tell the whole story. Changes in relationship functioning that take place after a job loss of one of the family members also play an important role and actually contribute to the gendered patterns in crossover effects. We also found that unemployment has detrimental consequences for spouses' well-being, even if we compare unemployment to jobs that are considered in the literature as precarious, less secure. And we also found that some couples are more vulnerable than others. This concerns especially the low-educated couples. And what is particularly troubling, in my opinion, is that financial support from the state for these couples, it helps, but it actually helps these couples less, as compared to the benefits that are derived by couples that are better educated. So people who are in a better situation already before this family crisis resulting from a job loss, they are sort of better prepared for the financial consequences of a job loss, and the benefits from the financial support from the state are stronger in this already advantaged group. And then one important message from our studies is that societal context matters. We could see that these differences in the crossover effects when we compare just two regions of the same country, and we see similar patterns when we carry out a systematic analysis of a large number of European countries. And I guess I will soon end, but I just wanted to share with you some thoughts that I have, like criticism that I have for myself. So first of all, I have to admit that in our papers, we focus on one specific type of partnerships. We focus on heterosexual couples, and what one could ask, what about same-sex couples? And I actually think that it's a super interesting question. I think that we should consider the whole diversity of different families in our research. It so happens that in the data that I have access to, same-sex couples could be identified, but the number of such partnerships is so small in our data sets that we wouldn't be able to draw any meaningful conclusions. However, I'm aware of some interesting ERC grants that are going on right now. I know about some projects where the data on same-sex couples is collected, and perhaps with collaboration with those researchers, we could also look at what's going on when job losses occur in such partnerships. I think it's super interesting also because I know from these ongoing studies that same-sex couples tend to be more egalitarian. The division of intra-household duties look completely different as compared to heterosexual couples. The power relations are different. So I think this could be one way of extending our research. I would also say that there's a whole range of questions that I actually didn't think about before the outbreak of the pandemic, but now they keep coming back to my mind. I think it's important to think about situations when different types of negative life course events co-occur. So, for example, one could ask, what about families where a job loss coincides with an illness of one of the family members? And psychologists discuss about it. They talk about pile-up of stressors and how this makes families particularly vulnerable. So this is something important to consider, probably. And also when I read about the results of research about the consequences of COVID, I keep on thinking about how quality of housing conditions, how access to space, how access to green areas affects the way that families can handle different types of stressful situations. I think it will be very relevant for this project as well. And another thing that I wanted to mention, just to make this really open, in this project I have so far focused on a really specific group of countries, because we, for my team, we focus on relatively well-off and actually well-researched European countries. And I believe it will be very relevant to also look at countries that are less investigated, countries from the global south, especially that in such contexts, gender inequality is stronger, policy support for the unemployed is sometimes basically non-existent. So I think it will be really relevant to look at those countries as well. Again, my reason for focusing on Europe is very pragmatic. It's just so hard to get access to data on other countries. But with collaborations, I think it will be possible to also go in that direction. So these are my thoughts. I'm really excited to hear what you think about these studies and also possibilities for future studies. So I just wanted to thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to hearing your comments. So many thanks.
Thank you, Anna, for your very, very interesting talk. Now I would like to open our Q&A session. And we already have a first question from Tomek. Let me read it out loud. Would you expect to see similar differences between West and East Germany in Poland, between Poland A and so-called Poland A and Poland B?
Yeah, I think it will be super interesting to examine that. And I'm already thinking about using panel data for Poland. I know that they exist and they are publicly available. So I'm thinking about this. I'm not aware of any studies that document differences between Poland A and Poland B. I just know about public debates about these differences, but I think it would be very relevant to examine that. So many thanks for hands up for this idea.
Okay. A question from Olga. Hello, thank you very much for the interesting talk. I'm not an expert, but I was wondering if in your project you took account in any way of people who live in long-term or quasi-permanent unemployment for whatever reason, or live on social benefits as a default situation, as comparing to a situation when being in employment in the default. How could we translate your fundings for such groups? Would that be some sort of a narrower societal context that matters? Thank you.
Yeah, this is a very good question as well. We have received such reactions also when we presented this research. So people often ask, okay, you're talking about the unemployment, what about other types of experiences such as inactivity? It's quite interesting to hear what kind of hypotheses or expectations we have. So very often researchers expect, yeah, if people are inactive, if they are just fine with not having a job, it shouldn't have such strong negative impact on well-being, and the same goes for a partner of a person who has sort of accepted the fact that she or he is unemployed and no longer searches for a job. So we actually make this distinction. We do in our analysis in all the papers, we make a distinction between the unemployed who actively look for jobs and this group of people who are inactive and who maybe receive some kind of social assistance, or maybe they have parental leave, whatever, but they are not searching for jobs. And the interesting thing is that in many cases, quite often this impact of inactivity is also negative. So it doesn't, and it's negative for the individual, and it's negative also for a partner. So I don't really buy the story that these guys have just come to terms with the fact that they have no jobs and that they accept the situation and that it's also okay for the partner. It feels like, based on these results that we see, I would say that these people maybe just ran out of possibilities to find jobs, but it doesn't mean that they are happy with their situation. So I think it's actually something important to highlight, and here I didn't mention that, but I think that such people are also disadvantaged, and the effects spill over onto or crossover onto family members. And you're right that it may be context dependent. Perhaps in some countries these effects could be weaker if again, if the generosity of support from the welfare state is super strong. But I think that this effect that people just become long-term unemployed, and at some point they stop searching, but they are still deprived from the benefits that employment normally provides, it's still visible in most contexts, at least in Europe.
It feels like Marx was right after all, that the job is substantial experience of a human being. Okay, yeah, we have a question from Monica. What is it that employment benefit helps less the group with worse? Oh, sorry. why is it that employment benefits helps less the group with worse financial status?
We believe it's because in this German context, at least, the level of benefits are closely related to prior earnings. Maybe I haven't explained that. So this means that if you become unemployed, you actually get higher unemployment benefits if your prior job was better paid. And that's usually the case for better educated. So this is one reason. But we were so sure that for lower educated, the financial resources and financial support should be more important because they are on average more deprived from economic resources already before the job loss. So it was a little bit surprising, but we think it may be due to this design of unemployment insurance in Germany.
That's actually quite interesting because it feels like if one is able to maintain lifestyle, one is also less dissatisfied with those changes of employment status. That if you are not threatened in existential way and you can live more or less in a similar manner that you lived before losing job, you are less affected. I don't know whether it has a lot to do with lifestyle, but that's at least you can maintain your social face in that sense that you can pretend that everything is fine. While if you have very low income, you are just fighting to survive. There is no space to live your life in that sense.
Yeah, exactly. And this is why there is an ongoing discussion also in this research on the individual consequences of unemployment, about which group of people can be seen as better prepared to handle with the consequences of unemployment. So some researchers expect that actually people who have low-paid jobs and lower education and lower status, they have less to lose, so to say, and also their lifestyle is not so dependent on having high incomes because they try to minimize their expenditures anyway. So losing a job shouldn't matter for them as much, and they are sort of better prepared to deal with the situation which occurs after becoming unemployed. Yeah, the results differ.
Yeah, we have another question from Tomek, but I will just, I want to abuse my status and ask you a follow-up question, because you didn't say anything about additional support network, which might be relevant for how people handle the unemployment status, that you actually can rely on your family, because probably if you are well off, your family is well off as well. And
yeah,
or your family is poor.
Yeah, and I believe that this is also quite important. We are not always able to capture that, but I think that it will be super interesting to know what kind of transfers people can count on. And we have had interesting discussions with our Italian colleagues where these family networks are very broad and very intense. And the transfers between generations, they're quite substantial. Yeah, so I think it will be super interesting to see that. Unfortunately, in the data, we don't always have the full information about that, but we will try to take that into account in future, because I think it's really important to see not only the support that comes from the state, so like outside of the family, but also to see it within the family.
Yeah. Okay, I just want to remind you that you can also raise a hand and use your mic to ask a question. And now we have a question from another question from Tomek. If I may, another one. What about immigrant families? Would you expect they will follow pattern from their home country, or rather adapt to conditions of the new country?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question as well. But there are so many dimensions in this, because we have the consequences of unemployment for health within families that may be at the different stages of integration. We know that immigrant families over time, they tend to adapt in terms of their expectations, in terms of their behavior to the local conditions. So probably looking at families at different stages of integration could show us different results. I think it's a very interesting point, but I don't have an answer, unfortunately.
I think that even today I saw an article in Financial Times about Bangladeshi and African families and how they experience negative effects of migration and loss of status in the UK. That actually basically they do experience both loss of status and financial deprivation after they migrate. So I think that there might be some studies, because it was financial.
Yeah,
and
that's a very vulnerable group, because very often they just don't have the same rights and the same access to financial support from the state. and they are actually the distance to their family network is too large. So this intra-family support does not always work, and actually very often they are the ones who are expected to support the family which stayed in their home country. So there are multiple dimensions of this disadvantage. Yeah, so I definitely think that it would be very relevant to look at those families.
Yeah, but yet again, they are still a minority, so it's hard to capture it in cross-national surveys.
Yeah, but we use not only survey data. Actually, right now, in the second project component that where we are working right now, we are using register data, and in registers we have everybody. And so even if we focus on very small groups such as migrants, we are able to investigate this particular group. So I think it's a good point and a very good idea, and I will definitely think about that.
But do you have this sort of data for Germany or only for Sweden? Because I know that Sweden is extremely good with this sort of data, but
yeah, register data are from Sweden. So when it comes to panel data that we used for the first project component, we wanted to use the data from a panel survey. Because in Swedish registers, it's a funny thing, we can't really distinguish between families or spouses, or we can see the spouses if they are married, but we cannot really be sure that two individuals who live together are partners. And quite many partnerships in Sweden remain unmarried. They might have children together, they might do many things together, but they will not marry. And then we just don't know if these are maybe two students, living in the same apartment, or are these spouses. So for this project, this first project component, I use data for Germany. But right now, when we are looking at families with biological children, and we're looking at the impact of parental unemployment on children's well-being, we will be using data for Sweden. And there we can basically, there are many things that we can examine and can look at very small and particularly vulnerable groups, just because registers are huge and they contain millions of observations. So we can, we can do whatever we want.
Yeah, because I think that for Swedish data, you also have information about income that you could control for yeah.
Swedish registers are like a big, like big brother. You observe everything from the birth. So basically we are able to observe the birth weight of infants. Then we can see the grades, we can see what's happening across the whole life course. So this is a fascinating data source.
Yeah.
But my students get scared when I tell them that.
That scientists know everything about you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I have another question from Olga. I also have yet another question. We were talking about the conservative West Germany. Is it meant in reference to gender gap, or is there a stronger cultural component of the value of labor in general? What made me think of it was actually Dominica's remark about Marx and the concept of Homo Sovieticus, part of which is the indifference to the result of his labor. Could that matter for the relation of well-being, unemployment, and financial benefits, for example?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I have a study which I haven't presented here. I just didn't want to come up with too many. But we looked at the concept of the value of work, or some people call it work ethics, but I think that it's not a good term. So basically what this dimension shows is the degree to which societies accept that someone is not doing paid work, essentially. In some countries, unemployment is actually quite stigmatizing because everyone expects that everyone should work and everyone should do paid work. Otherwise, you're seen as a parasite. And for some reason, this is, for example, true for countries from Central and Eastern Europe, true also for Poland. In some other countries, the stigmatization is not that strong. And in another study, I have seen that indeed in countries where it is basically not socially acceptable that you don't do paid work. The effects of unemployment for individuals and also for partners are stronger. So you're totally right that there's also this cultural dimension. There are probably many dimensions, and I'm not sure if over the 5 years that I have for this project, I will be able to investigate all of them, but it's interesting. It's an interesting area, I think.
Okay. We still have about 5 minutes for questions. So if you have any, raise your hand or use chat. We usually gather more life science, hard science crowd. So social sciences are not really that common among our attendees. But it feels like it's quite related to our everyday experience. Okay, I see that we don't have any questions from the audience, but I have many questions. So maybe I will have one question, and if there someone will come up with another one, we will take it. Because I was also wondering how this effects of unemployment is moderated by the prospects for a new job. Because when job market is dynamic, you can look for another job, and you can at least, I don't know, I think that hope is a good term to use here, that you have a hope to change your situation, and you have some information that, oh yes, I can find employment. Can you control for that in your data?
Yeah, I think that this could be one of the explanations for the reasons why we have seen weaker effects among the better educated couples. I think that one thing is that they have resources that they have accumulated over their working lifetime prior to a job loss. And so they have more resources that they can use to deal with, they have more savings and so on. But another thing is exactly what you mentioned, that probably they can anticipate that it will be easy for them to improve their situation in the nearest future, and so they don't worry as much and they don't get depressed, and maybe all these mechanisms that I have been talking about, financial and non-financial, are not that detrimental for individual well-being and for spouses' well-being.
Okay.
But also another aspect of it is related to the variation of the effects across time and space. So one thing is that the effects of unemployment often differ depending on whether one loses a job during a recession or during economic boom. And also there's this research on neighborhood effects where there's discussion if this is better to lose a job when everybody else is also unemployed. So there's this discussion about the local norm of unemployment, that when everyone else is also unemployed, then you don't worry that much because you don't stand out so much, and neither does your spouse for that matter. So yeah, I guess that this context matters also in that sense.
Okay, thank you. I see that we do not have any other questions from the audience, but also our time for the webinar is up. So let me thank you, Anna, for your very interesting talk, and to the audience for questions. I just want to remind you about our Facebook, about our Twitter, and about Polonium Network. And I strongly encourage you to sign up for our webpage. You will get all the information about our webinars there. And also we will be able to learn about Polish scientific diaspora. I hope to see you at our next webinar, and yeah, thank you and have a good evening.